There is no greater display of emotional intelligence in the erotic realm than a man who knows how and wants to please without needing to dominate. Let's begin here. When a man goes down on a woman, he is not simply performing an act. He is sending a message, one that says, I see you, I honor your pleasure, and I am here fully, presently, without ego. This is not about submission. It's about attunement. It's about erotic empathy. It's about dismantling the old myth that sex is something done to a woman and instead co-creating something with her. You see, in my years of working with couples and individuals from every walk of life, one truth has become evident again and again. Sexual satisfaction is rarely just about sex. It is about connection, communication, trust, curiosity. And nothing reveals these qualities more clearly than the way a man approaches his partner's pleasure. Let's talk about generosity. Men who prioritize a woman's satisfaction, especially through oral sex, are often the ones who understand that pleasure is not transactional. They give not to get, but to connect. They are present, not performative. They listen, not with their ears, but with their mouth, their hands, their attention. They respond to breath, to rhythm, to subtle shifts in body language. And what does this do to a woman? It tells her, you are allowed to be complex. You are allowed to receive. You are not a performance. You are a partner. Let's talk about masculinity. Insecure men fear the power of a fully expressed woman. But confident men, men who are grounded in their own worth, are not intimidated by her voice, her climax, her command of her own body. In fact, they are aroused by it, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. Because to them, power is not a threat, it's an invitation to meet her where she is, to help her rise, not shrink, to celebrate her pleasure, not control it. Let's talk about trust. Oral sex is one of the most vulnerable acts for both partners. For a woman, it requires trust that she will not be shamed, rushed, or misunderstood. For a man, it requires the humility to slow down, to explore, to learn, without always knowing the outcome. This mutual vulnerability is what builds intimacy, and it is in this space, this raw, honest, erotic space, that the deepest bonds are formed. And let's talk about culture. For generations, female pleasure was hidden, ignored, or labeled as too much. But the man who chooses to center it, not out of obligation, but out of joy, is not just being a good lover. He is rewriting the script. He is telling his partner and the world, your desire matters. Your body is sacred, and your orgasm is not optional. So, what are these men the most of? The most emotionally intelligent, the most erotically fluent, the most present, aware, and attuned, the most courageous, because it takes courage to love a woman's body in a world that still tries to silence it. These men are not perfect, but they are present. They are not performative, but passionate. And above all, they are partners, not just participants. So if you're a man watching this, ask yourself not just, do I do it, but how you do it, why you do it, and what it says about who you are. And if you're a woman, know this: you are worthy of a lover who honors all of you, your mind, your spirit, and yes, your deepest pleasure. Pleasure is not a luxury, it is a language. Learn to speak it fluently. Esther Perel's style in the erotic realm, generosity is not merely a gesture. It is a profound indicator of emotional intelligence. When a man approaches a woman's pleasure with patience, curiosity, and a genuine desire to give, he reveals something about how he relates not only to her body, but to her humanity. Sexual generosity speaks volumes about a man's inner world. It tells us that he has moved beyond the binary framework of domination and submission, performance and reward, goal and outcome. It tells us that he sees sex not as a conquest, but as a conversation, one that requires listening as much as speaking, sensing as much as doing. This kind of man does not enter the intimate space with a checklist. He enters with attunement. He pays attention. He understands that a woman's body is not a puzzle to be solved, but a landscape to be explored. with reverence, with nuance, with presence. This capacity to stay with, to adjust, to respond to subtle feedback. This is the work of someone who has cultivated emotional awareness. He knows that pleasure is not about pressure, it's about permission. And he offers that permission not through words alone, but through action, slowing down, tuning in, letting go of the need to control or impress. There is a quiet confidence in a man who gives without asking for applause. He is not fragile in the face of a woman's needs. He is not undone by the unpredictability of her arousal. On the contrary, he finds joy in her joy. He receives fulfillment through her release. This is emotional intelligence in its erotic form, the ability to be present without ego, to give without fear, and to attune without needing to fix. These men often carry emotional maturity because they understand that real intimacy is built in the subtle moments, in the inhale before a kiss, in the silence after a climax, in the rhythm of touch that says, I'm here, I'm with you, I see you. Sexual generosity, especially when expressed through oral sex, also reflects a level of psychological safety. A man who gives in this way is often comfortable with vulnerability, not only his partner's, but his own. He is willing to be close. Not just physically, but emotionally. He is not afraid of the intensity of connection, nor is he threatened by the depth of feminine desire. Instead, he welcomes it, he meets it, he participates in it. And in doing so, he creates a space where both people can unfold, free from shame, free from roles, free to simply be. This is what makes sexual generosity such a powerful act. It is not about technique or performance. It is about presence. It is about a man's ability to step outside of himself, not to disappear, but to connect, to let go of the need to be the center and instead become the conduit for shared pleasure, mutual growth, and erotic truth. When we speak of oral sex, particularly a man giving to a woman, we are not simply describing a physical act. We are entering the realm of erotic power dynamics, of vulnerability, of trust. The moment a man chooses to focus entirely on a woman's pleasure, not as a side note, but as the central experience, a profound exchange begins. What appears on the surface as a man, uncontrolled, performing an act of giving, is often the very moment where he is surrendering. And what appears as a woman receiving is often the moment where she steps into her full, unashamed, embodied power. This is the paradox of eroticism. It flips the script on who holds the power, and it invites both partners into a dance where dominance and vulnerability are fluid, not fixed. In the act of oral sex, a man is physically below, literally and symbolically. But this is not weakness. This is not subservience. This is choice. This is presence. It takes a particular kind of strength to embrace that position with confidence, not as an act of humiliation, but as a gesture of reverence. To place oneself at the service of someone else's pleasure, fully attentively, and without rushing to reclaim the spotlight, is to say, I am secure in myself. I do not lose anything by uplifting you. Women, in turn, are asked to trust, to allow themselves to be seen, smelled, tasted fully and completely. And in a world where many women are taught to shrink, to hide, to apologize for their bodies, to be placed in the position of receiving unapologetically is not a small thing. It demands emotional safety. It requires a partner who does not flinch in the face of rawness, who does not recoil from desire in its untamed form. And so when a woman allows herself to be open, to receive, to be worshiped in this way, she is not just yielding to sensation, she is yielding to trust. This dynamic, one giving and one receiving, is not fixed, it is fluid. In the best erotic encounters, power is not taken. It is given and then returned. There is a mutual exchange that makes both partners feel elevated, not reduced. And when it is done with presence, with care, with integrity, something deeper is communicated. You can trust me with your pleasure. You can trust me with your body. You can trust me with your vulnerability. Men who understand this are rare, not because the act is rare, but because the depth behind the act is often ignored. They know that eroticism is not about taking control, but about navigating the delicate balance of giving and receiving. They are not afraid to release control momentarily in order to build something far more powerful: connection. This is what makes the exchange sacred, not the act itself, but the intentional, conscious trust that flows between two people who are willing to meet each other fully, vulnerably, and without shame. In a culture that often treats sex like currency, where pleasure is given with an expectation of immediate return, the idea of non-transactional intimacy can feel radical. But true erotic generosity, the kind that leaves an imprint on the soul, not just the body, is never transactional. It is rooted in presence, not performance. And perhaps nowhere is this more evident than in the act of a man giving oral sex to a woman without the unspoken agreement that he must receive something in return. This kind of giving breaks a cultural script that has for too long reduced pleasure to a tit-for-tat exchange. We live in a world where sex is often negotiated unconsciously. A kiss leads to a touch, which leads to more, and everything seems to move in a linear direction with a predictable goal. But non-transactional pleasure interrupts that rhythm. It's not about keeping score. It's about being with the other, not just doing to the other. A man who engages in oral sex from this mindset, from a place of curiosity, of attentiveness, of authentic desire to give, is not operating under pressure or expectation. He's not saying, I'll do this so I can get that. He's saying, this alone, this moment, this act is enough for me. That mindset requires a deep level of maturity because it resists the ego's craving for applause. It resists the performance of masculinity that equates dominance with desirability. Instead, it shifts the focus to connection, to tuning in, to asking, how do you feel? Are you present? Are you opening, softening, trusting? This is not just sensuality, this is intimacy, the kind that can't be faked or rushed. When a man gives without needing to receive in the same moment, he allows space for the woman to stay in her body rather than jumping out of it to wonder what she now owes him. He says, without words, you don't need to give me anything. Your pleasure is not a debt. It is an experience I want to share with you. And in that moment, she feels something rare. The safety to fully receive without guilt, without pressure, without performance. This kind of generosity also reflects a man who is sexually secure. He does not view giving as a diminishment of his masculinity, but as an expression of it. He is not anxious to get his, because he understands that arousal can be mutual without being symmetrical. That sometimes the deepest satisfaction comes not from what we take, but from what we are able to give freely without condition. And in this non-transactional space, something beautiful happens. The woman's pleasure becomes expansive, not constrained. Her body softens, her breath deepens, her trust builds. And the erotic connection becomes something far more powerful than a performance. It becomes a shared language of care, presence, and unspoken respect. Because when pleasure is not a bargain, it becomes a bond. In many cultures, a woman's sexuality has long been wrapped in silence, shame, and control. She is taught to be desirable but not too desiring, to be attractive but not assertive, to receive pleasure but not to claim it. In this framework, female sexuality is often something passive, something done to her rather than something she owns, initiates, and experiences fully. So when a man takes the time, the care, and the presence to focus on a woman's pleasure, not as an afterthought but as a centerpiece, something radical happens. Her pleasure becomes empowerment. It's not just about sensation, it's about affirmation. It's the unspoken message that says, you are allowed to want. You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to be the center, not because you earned it, but because you deserve it. When a man engages with a woman's body in this way, particularly through oral sex, he is often undoing years, if not decades, of internalized silence. His presence becomes a mirror in which she sees her body not as something shameful, not as something to hide, but as something worthy of reverence and celebration. And this is the deep psychological shift. Her pleasure is no longer a risk. It is a right. She begins to associate sexual attention with respect rather than pressure, with presence rather than performance. It changes how she holds herself, not just in bed, but in life. Because a woman who is allowed to express her sexuality safely is a woman who will start to own her voice in other areas too. In relationships, in conversations, in decisions, pleasure in this context becomes political, it becomes psychological, it becomes power. For the man, this shift requires a willingness to step aside from cultural scripts that equate dominance with control. It takes a certain erotic intelligence to understand that empowering your partner doesn't diminish you, it expands both of you. These men don't just make space for a woman's pleasure, they hold it, they honor it. They say, your arousal doesn't intimidate me, it inspires me. Your release doesn't threaten me, it frees me too. In this space, the man is not merely a giver of pleasure, he is a partner in transformation. Because when a woman feels safe, when she feels cherished, when her body is touched not with shame but with wonder, she steps into her full erotic self. She becomes not only sexually awakened but emotionally alive. And in that moment, both partners are elevated. They are no longer acting out inherited scripts. They are writing new ones together. This is why oral sex in its most conscious form is far more than an act. It is a practice of trust, of care, and of liberation. When done with genuine presence, it becomes a healing ritual, one that rewires the relationship a woman has with her own body, and in doing so, gives her back a part of herself she may have learned to hide. Secure masculinity has nothing to prove because it already knows its value. It doesn't posture, it doesn't perform, and it certainly doesn't panic in the face of female power. When a man is secure in his masculinity, he is not threatened by a woman's voice, her body, her desire, or her complexity. He doesn't need to dominate to feel strong. He doesn't see giving as weakness. He sees it as strength. And this becomes incredibly evident in the way he approaches sex, particularly when it comes to oral pleasure. Insecure masculinity is fragile. It flinches when it feels out of control. It seeks approval, praise, and often positions sex as a tool for validation. But a man who confidently and consciously gives pleasure, not to impress, not to manipulate, but to connect, shows us a deeper layer of self-assurance. His masculinity is not performative, it's embodied, it's grounded, it's calm. This man does not need to center himself to feel important. He can be the giver and still feel powerful. In fact, he knows that giving, particularly in such an intimate, attentive way, is not the opposite of power, but a more evolved expression of it. He doesn't measure his manhood by how fast or how hard he can go, but by how deeply he can attune, how present he can stay, and how much trust he can cultivate. When a man kneels between a woman's legs and does so without ego, without anxiety, without pressure, he's not just performing a sexual act, he is expressing his relationship to himself. He's saying, I don't lose anything by focusing on you. I don't feel small when you feel powerful. I don't feel emasculated by your satisfaction. I feel fulfilled by it. In these moments, masculinity is not loud. It is not brash. It is not filled with bravado. It is tender, present, committed. And perhaps most importantly, it is unshaken by vulnerability, his or hers. Because secure men are comfortable in emotionally intimate spaces. They don't run from nuance. They embrace it. They don't feel the need to conquer a woman. They want to explore her with curiosity, with care, with courage, and women feel this. They can tell the difference between a man who gives to get and one who gives to connect, between the man who performs generosity to appear evolved and the one who simply is. The latter creates a safe space, not just physically, but psychologically, where a woman can unfold, express, and let go. And when she does, it isn't just her experience that deepens, it's his too. Secure masculinity allows for mutual elevation, not hierarchy. It doesn't silence or shrink the other. It creates room for both people to rise erotically and emotionally. This kind of man doesn't need applause because his validation isn't external. No, it's internal. It comes from knowing who he is what he values, and how deeply he's able to connect when he moves beyond performance and into presence. So when we ask the question, what kind of man chooses to focus on a woman's pleasure without shame, without ego, without demand, the answer is not just about sex. It's about identity, it's about presence, it's about emotional maturity wrapped in erotic expression. These men are not defined by how much they take, but by how deeply they give. They carry a quiet power, the kind that listens, that holds, that honors the body and the being. They understand that female pleasure is not a challenge to be mastered, but a language to be learned, a connection to be nurtured. In giving so attentively, they do more than stimulate, they liberate. They create space for a woman to feel seen, safe, and celebrated in her full sensuality. And in doing so, they too are transformed. Because when we give without keeping score, when we love without fear, when we explore without judgment, we all rise. This is the essence of secure, generous, conscious masculinity, not loud, not showy, but deeply erotic, deeply human, and deeply rare. And it's time we stopped calling it exceptional and started calling it essential.